welcome to today's show and tell. It's the second one we're hosting in the series. We've got 3 more to go. I'll pop the link in the chat in a second. My name is Anne Maria. I'm leading the Butter community. I get to hang out with cool folks like Hannah and you all every single week. And needless to say that I am improving my toolbox and tips and tricks facilitation, which is kind of like a privileged position. We've got Hannah with us today. Hannah, wiggle a finger to the camera. There we go. I've met her through the Butter community and very impressed by the work she's been doing. We have a common passion for, not for UX, because I don't know much about that, but we have a common passion for building community. Hannah, if you haven't connected with her yet on LinkedIn, I'll share the link as well. She's the co-founder of the Fountain Institute. She is a seasoned learning designer expert with over 15 years of experience creating engaging learning experiences. And she also founded the Guild of Working Designers, the community I was mentioning. It's a space for designers to support, commiserate, and activate one another. And her insights have helped countless of individuals enhance their facilitation, problem solving, and collaboration skills. And today, she's going to take us in the back end of one of their programs. And I am very keen to give her the word in a second. And let me just see what else do we have here. Fun, engaging, informative, iterative. Everyone loves learning. Woo! Magic wand. Immersive, collaborative, confidence. Beautiful. All right. So now that we have our brains primed on beautiful, futuristic, effective, immersive learning experiences, Hannah, I pass the talking stick to you. Take it away.
Thanks. I'm really excited to be here. If you don't mind spotlighting me, that would be perfect as well. But yeah, I'll tell you a little bit more about my background, about the Fountain Institute, and what we're going to dive into today, which is our cohort-based live courses, which is our kind of main service that we offer. But first, I'll tell you about me. So I have a background in the fine arts. I studied sculpture. And once in a while, I still get to do that in my ceramics installation work. And then after that, I moved into studying museum education, where I was creating participatory learning experiences for visitors at museums. So instead of thinking about sitting in front of an artwork and lecturing at them, we try to work about how do we do activities, how do we get people talking around the artwork, how do we get people to kind of create their own meaning there. And then after I decided to leave that world, I moved to Berlin, Germany, and I started doing brand design and web design, and connected with an old friend of mine who I'd known from years ago, Jeff Humble, who's my co-founder. And we started the Fountain Institute, which I'll tell you a little bit more about what that is and where the name comes from and what our offerings are there as well. So yeah, as I said, we have the Fountain Institute. We're really focused on live workshops, global cohorts. We do everything online. So we have people from all over the world and really building real world skills. And yes, our logo is a fountain, is a urinal. And so I'm going to just quickly kind of mention why this is. We kind of get this a lot, but also start the story of where the Fountain Institute came from. So we, with my background in art and Jeff's background in graphic and UX design, he was a head of design at a UX boot camp before this. We started kind of talking about these combinations of the art world and the design world and the overlap of the processes. And when we were considering beginning workshops, we started talking about what the kind of inspiration for this was. And that came from over 100 years ago. And yes, this is kind of a ripoff of Marcel Duchamp's The Fountain, which he maybe some people might disagree that he was the person, but for the sakes, we'll talk about him, created kind of the first quote unquote conceptual piece of art where his hand didn't actually make the piece of art. He took a urinal, put it on the side, signatured it in another name. And that was kind of this initiation of the concept of the art is more important than the person making it. And that was really something we felt was also happening in the design world at the time, where product designers and UX designers and service designers and all these kind of different names were really pushing for the way that they think and not what they produce. And that's kind of inspired us to move forward within the offerings that we have. And at the moment, what we offer is 4 courses in research, experimentation, facilitation / workshops, and also strategy. And these will actually be the lenses that I use today to kind of go into a little bit more of the process of how we build our courses as well. So just to give you a brief understanding of what we do now, we offer these short courses for mid-career product designers, as I said, and there are 10 live workshops over 22 days. This is kind of a brief schedule. You can start to see a little bit of what we have in here. Whoops, just give me one moment. There we go. So we have live workshops. We are using Butter and Miro and Disco, which is something I'll talk about later as well. And within these lenses, this came through a variety of iterations. This is not where we started. So I'll kind of take you where we started and how we got to this point as well. So let's take a look back at those 4 different lenses. So we'll start with research. And if some of you are familiar with the design process, I see some familiar faces in the audience too. Rachel and Naya, it's nice to see you. I know you understand the importance of research. And what we started off before we even knew what we were going to offer is just doing a lot of interviews. We knew that there was this gap in the market that we saw from a lot of smaller like people transitioning through boot camps, a lot of support in the beginning of your career, but not so much in the middle and further on in your career as well. There's a lot of asynchronous courses out there, but we know that there's issues with motivation and getting people to finish. There's a lot of abysmal completion rates for those. And so we kind of knew this from our past experience, and we wanted to just start asking people about their experience in education. So we looked at junior designers, we looked at artists, we looked at people who are interested in the design world, we talked to head of designs all over the place. And we really went broad in this research where we just kind of were like, what does education mean to you? And what is your personal experience with learning? Tell us about your last learning experience, what was good about it, what wasn't, and also talking to them about their career paths. So this was kind of the iteration the beginning of diving into just what are people's perceptions of education, but also their own personal experience. And as I mentioned, we also kind of looked at what the market was. And we saw, let me move this pointer for a second. There we go. As I said, we were kind of looking at the career path, late in the career, and then entry level, and then also this kind of like self-paced MOOC, maybe some of you are familiar with, and then over to the cohort-based. And we decided through kind of where that gap is that we wanted to be in this upper corner where we wanted to be cohort-based and live and late in their career. And that was really important to us to kind of fill this gap in the market that we saw through a variety of the research that we were doing. So where did that leave us? We were talking to a lot of people. This was, to give you some reference too, this started before 2020, but this really dove into everything at March 2020. Maybe some of you can guess what that was. And we had some kind of time to talk and think about it. And I was freelancing and we were building the brand of the Fountain Institute, let's say, but we really decided to jump in the deep end and decided to build an MVP. Like, we've done this research. We understand that there's like this gap and this need from learners, and we want to build, we looked at like the online courses, as I've mentioned, focusing on beginners and leaders. And also we knew that like fast-paced startups don't have the time to train mid-career designers always. And so we also really wanted to focus on people who are in their jobs. And so what we did is we built our kind of learning experience through knowing we were going to do live courses, but we also built a dashboard. So we were using Notion at the time, trying to keep this as scrappy as possible. We ended up building a dashboard, doing some user tests. So what does that mean? Bringing in some friends, having them walk through this dashboard and iterating on it. And in 2 months, we built together a dashboard, a learning experience, and different understanding from the research that we did. What are the kind of points and levels that people want to move into? So this isn't where research stopped. We continuously do this all the time. And I'm not just saying that because we have a course called Continuous Research, but we really have had different moments in time where it's been really important to sit down and either talk to our alumni, talk to potential students, talk to people who were interested but didn't purchase. So we kind of have these different personas over the time that we've worked with in our research. And I'd love to know from you guys, like, if you've done, maybe you haven't called it like research on your users in the past, but maybe you've dove into kind of who you want to work with. I just love for you to share with an emoji, like, how has this research gone for you in the past? Maybe you've gotten some insights, maybe it's gone horrible, but you can share by just using a response. In the emoji, I see kind of a some hums coming up. Yeah, this one happens a lot. Some thumbs up. Yeah. So if you want to put in more kind of explaining yourself, feel free to put that in the chat as well. But research can be hard, and research doesn't give us all the answers either, which is why we then started thinking about experimentation. So as a lot of things in life, this isn't exactly linear, so we'll be jumping around in time a little bit as well. But let's go back to when we were still doing that initial research, spring 2020. We put together a little course, as we said, and we called it Art School Dropout. At this point, we hadn't done the research yet. We didn't know what subject matters we wanted to dive into, but we were kind of looking at testing out different live asynchronous or live digital virtual experiences. And at the time we were using Mural, and we built this 4-part workshop series that was about the four elements of design, talking about creative problem solving, talking about critiques, and we just invited our friends to it. And we would host these 1-hour workshops and kind of learn week to week, how do we change the interactions? How do we move people along the board? What is the pacing that needs to happen? How much capacity do people have? And we took those learnings, and then in the fall of 2020, our first real big experiment after that was, I mentioned, was the MVP, which I see AUX here because we reduced it. It was called Advanced UX Design for the Real World, which at that time we were not really great with naming. And so I would suggest not naming something that long. So we reduced it to AUX. And what that looked like at the time was we had two live workshops a week. But I actually wouldn't even call them workshops. And in our understanding, we didn't call them workshops. We had a live, what we called kind of class, which was an hour and a half, and then we had a live workshop. And at the time, we were doing this because we kind of separated a lot of the theory in 1.5 hours, and we separated the working time in another. And I think this was partially because of splitting up. It felt like if we teach them some information at first, and then 2 days later, they can kind of sit with it and then do that information. But one thing that we really noticed in this experiment after a couple cohorts is that 1.5 hour lecture, it's really difficult to keep people engaged and to keep people talking and to keep their attention span. And it didn't really seem like there was a real necessity or reason to separate these two pieces. And we were also kind of thinking about that. And this was actually a 6-week course also. So in the beginning we had 6 weeks, and so it was 12 different workshops, and we did 4 cohorts of it. But if any of you have kind of built cohorts before, or build courses or build learning experience, over time, kind of the industry says that the 3rd and 4th can kind of sometimes be the most difficult. And we were starting to notice some things and wanting to do a little bit more research into this area as well. But at the time, we were still running meetups and master classes, and we have at this point we had reached over almost 1,500 live class participants, 900 people from our meetups, 550 from our live workshop attendees. But we wanted to grow, and we really wanted to continue. So we went back to these kind of, what do we do experiments on? What do we even need to focus on? And so we looked at the problems and opportunities. So some of the problems are everything was manual and consuming all of our time. It was the two of us doing all of this with the Notion databases, email invites. Everything was really manual at the time. So that was really difficult for us. There was also, there we go. We continued to hear from alumni that they wanted to dive deeper into certain topics. So the advanced course was kind of this broad, it had everything in it. It was kind of the boot camp for your middle of your career, let's say. How do you get to the advanced parts of it? But there were certain things that people wanted when we talked to them. Like, oh, I joined because I really wanted to get better at research, or I joined because I really wanted to know more about stakeholder management. And so we kept hearing these in our research. We also know that designers are really busy, and that 6 weeks ended up being, we had a really great retention rate, but it was still a huge amount of time from them as they're still working full-time jobs. So we looked at our assumptions and we thought, we want to kind of change things up. We want to try something new. And so we had some assumptions. Our email subscribers will pay for short workshops. We kind of thought maybe there's somebody who doesn't have the time for the 6 weeks or doesn't have the full budget for the course, maybe they want something smaller. We also assumed alumni will purchase another learning experience from us. We had a 96% graduation rate, 9.6 approval rating, or whatever those things are called, I forget. But we kind of assumed that there was some more desire there. And we had this new course content that we kind of assumed was desired from the user, like interviews and talking, but we wanted to try it out. So we took these 3 assumptions and we did one-off workshops in the fall of 2021. This one was called testing product ideas, which was the kind of our trying new content and also seeing if students would purchase courses from us, but also kind of trying these short areas. And so what we found is actually in that time, over these 3 months, we had 60 paid attendees, so 3 different workshops over once a month, and 23% of course graduates purchased from us again. So we were starting to see that there was some of our assumptions were starting to be slightly validated or starting to give us this idea that we should be moving forward with these ideas. And so we took the time, and this launching in the spring of 2022 is when we built what we have today, which is the Designing Product Experiments course, facilitating workshops, defining UX strategy, and continuous UX research. And those really built out of the 4 different, from the 6-week course that we originally had. So we went a little bit more specific. We added the defining UX strategy was probably the newest one. We probably only had like a little bit of content there, so building that out. And so we were able to kind of really robustly offer shorter courses for designers who have not a lot of time, and also keeping it within the budget that a lot of professional development budgets are at as well. So what does that look like today? So we have a live feedback call, which we added actually more events because we were doing individual feedback before then, and that wasn't scalable. So now we still do written individual feedback, but we have one group call. And all of our other events, they're workshops. People are actively doing things. We didn't separate this content and activity. We all brought it together. We also switched over some of our programs that we use. This is before this, but we switched to Miro because that's what our users were using. They were submitting all their homeworks in Miro boards, and we're like, well, let's just use what they use. And we decided we switched from Zoom to Butter, which I'm sure a lot of you here know why that is, so I won't go into that. We switched over to a platform called Disco, which is a learning platform that was being built specifically for live cohort-based courses. So it's a new company. They were still building it, and they're still building at the time, but their value proposition really identified with us. And it was great for us. And so that was our choice. That made sense. So before I move on to the next phase, which is the facilitation side of it, I'd love for you to guys just take a 1-minute brainstorm and maybe think, what is an assumption you have about your own learning experiences? Maybe or what it is that you're building, or why you're here. And this can maybe be a taking off spot for what you can start an experiment on within your own experience. So I have a timer I put in the toolbox. I'm going to give you guys some music and okay, so the next idea is the facilitation side of it. This is my favorite side. When we were thinking and kind of started the Fountain Institute, we had a policy for ourselves: avoid one-way interactions at all costs. And this is something that we really thought about when we were talking about all different elements. And so you saw a little bit this with the shift that we had from the different types of classes to all workshops. But I want to dive into the workshop just a little bit. I know we don't have that much time, but this is a brief overview of a workshop outline that I use. And what I want to talk about here is the different colors or different types of action or different types. So I'll give you a quick, where like the gray boxes are a little bit of lecture informing. The green boxes are conversation. So maybe posing a question to somebody or having a conversation with a group. The blues are activities, so doing something. And the yellows are breakout rooms. And so you can see in the 2 hours, we're changing this up over and over again. And this is something we've built up over time. Something I was doing beforehand, but Wes Cow put a terminology to it for me, which is state change method. So if you're interested in something like that, you can look up state change method, but it really helps. And we hear over and over again, students say like, oh my God, that 2 hours felt like 20 minutes. I think that's really important when you have these live classes as well. Here's a quick little look at what a class might look like. It's also Inception, where we're in butter, but the kind of working on there. But we also think about the facilitation of the experience as a whole, not just the one course itself and not just the workshops themselves, but we think about how are people coming into the courses and how can we support them after the workshop as well, or after the course as well. So we offer a lot of resources on our website, free tools that you can download. We also offer a lot of master classes, either live or recorded. So you can kind of, and then we have the Guild of Working Designers, which is a Slack group as well as Meetup. And so we can kind of get to know people before they jump in. After the fact, we offer even more opportunities for our alumni. So our alumni, we hold a certain number of spots in our meetups every year for alumni to try out being a speaker at. A lot of them have never spoken at an event before, have never spoken publicly about stuff. So we offer that to them. We also offer them opportunities to write their experiences or get some exposure through the blog articles. It's something they're really interested in. And so we like to think about the facilitation, kind of the whole process with them. And so this is really important to us as well. We're going to skip that one, but we'll just jump right into the last one, which is strategy. And for us, we've talked about this research, experimentation, and facilitation. And this really is our strategy, is using these lenses, using these design processes as a way to really look at the learning experience and look at the company as a whole and build it together. So if you haven't heard of the double diamond, then something you can look up as well. But it's also very similar to what some people describe building workshops, diverging and converging, the problem space, the design space. And with that, this year, or the whole time, we've now hit over 6,000 live class participants through our workshops and our meetups and our master classes. And it's really been a really exciting time. And it is just, I know this is me and me, but I also want to show Jeff's face because it's just the two of us. We build all this together. And we do have our CEO, which is my dog. But other than that, we kind of, all of this comes back to this idea of where designers and learning experiences is kind of pushing this idea of what we think. And that is really what our mission is at the Fountain Institute. It's a world that seeks designers for the way that they think, and not just what they produce. So I want to leave some time for questions as well. Yeah, if you are a designer or you know a designer, please have them apply to the Guild of Working Designers. We're really open to just make sure that they're working designers. And if you want to dive into facilitating workshops a little bit more, just a shameless self-promotion where we start our next cohort on Monday. So please just reach out if you have any questions as well. But I'd love to leave the rest of the time for questions.
Sweet. Thank you very much, Hannah. Let me do this and bring everyone on the screen. All right, several users are typing in the chat. Feel free to also queue yourself up or simply unmute and ask Hannah a question. We still got about 15 minutes to go. 12 with a bit of a checkout. Questions, curiosities?
I was going to type it because it's not all that interesting, but I might as well just say.
Go for it.
Can you just speak a bit to was it the stage method for designing the workshop? Just because I looked it up quickly on Google, I was curious, it looked interesting, and I can't really find anything specific, so maybe you have a bit more information.
Yeah, I know Wes Cow.
Okay.
She has an article about state change method. It was a terminology. It was something that we were doing, but this is like kind of a terminology to put on it. And the idea here is just changing the person's state of, like, the change of state. So part of the ways that we do this is through this program I use called but maybe some use OBS or some other programs, but I can change where I am very easily. This is like a bit of state change. Also asking you to share something, putting a question up. I also had an interactive stamp card that I can try right now as well. Maybe you guys can kind of share with that as well. Well, I feel confident facilitating learning experiences. So this is a scale. You can kind of stomp there wherever you want. These are all different examples of how you can kind of change things up, going to opening up to the conversation. It has a lot of different advantages with motivation, with keeping people excited and kind of engaged, providing different ways for people to participate. Not everyone always wants to unmute themselves and talk. So is there ways that we can have people communicate their thoughts into the conversation? So, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you answer this regularly, but there's the question of cost, and I mean, obviously the audience determines what that is, right? If you're dealing with a corporate audience, it's a bit easier to charge more, but I'm working on some workshops right now, and there is a hesitation to charge too much and fail. Or not necessarily fail, but you know what I mean. Like,
yeah. I mean, so We definitely built up cost over time. So a lot of times the first offering that we would do, like the first cohort, let's say the first version, would be at a lower price range because we're not 100% sure with it, first of all. We're testing it out, and we'd love to get some honest feedback. So for examples, the UX strategy course, the first time we offered it, I think it was $5.95 or $6.95, I can't remember. And now it's the essential seat is $9.95, and then the premium seat, which offers one-on-one coaching, 3 calls in the course and 3 calls after the course, is $12.95. And this kind of built up over time, and we've kind of played around with pricing all over the place. I'm not sure we have it secured, but one thing we like to think about is like, what is the education budget in the markets that you're looking at? So if you're asking people if assuming people's companies are going to pay, then you can do some research out there to see, like, the US market is different than the European market versus Asian markets. So like, where maybe is the education budget in those markets, and trying to fit within that is one strategy.
Okay, thumbs up, I see there. And the mic comes to you, Philip.
Thank you. Yeah, Hannah, thank you for the presentation, and nice to see you on this format as well.
Yeah.
I was really curious on the validation part, and I think it's also a bit maybe what Gabriel was pointing towards, but I'm curious, how do you decide on how much time and effort to invest in building a course or building a new learning program before validation? Because as you mentioned, you're trying it out, so you already created it. Is it like a lean and mean version, or do you upgrade it over time, or can you maybe elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, I think it depends on what it is that you're like validating, whether there's like the desire from the audience for the subject matter, or are you trying to figure out if the subject matter itself is right. But a lot of the experiments that we do are really small too. So testing out with social media, with our community, posing a question, seeing what has interest, and then we kind of build up from there. And so building out, and again, this combines the experimentation with the research. So kind of talking to alumni, talking to new students, understanding what are the gaps, talking to design leaders and managers, like what are the gaps you see in your team? What kind of areas do you want? And so kind of seeing that first. And then we try to do the one-off workshops first, so it's really kind of seeing, will people put money to this? Because there's a real big difference between the desire of something or saying that you'll do something and actually paying for it. And so the one-off workshops gives us a real opportunity to try that out.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, Hannah, we've got a question from Joy in the chat. How did you market your course to prospective learners?
Yeah, so we do it in a couple different ways. We do have an email list, which we have a weekly newsletter to. But how I think we really built up that email list is through our live events. So through doing like the meetups, we also do master classes. So kind of getting the word out there and seeing people, and then kind of capturing them in as well. And I think it's just about putting out good content a lot of the time, really, especially for mid-career people. Like, they don't want the same answers that they hear all the time. They want to go a little bit more in depth. So some of that focus has been on that area as well. And then the community, I think it's just like support. As I said, that's part of that facilitation. It's part of like building that connection before and after, and people getting to know us.
Chris, the mic is coming to you.
Awesome. Hey, Hannah.
Hey.
I've got a question about, have you determined an optimal size per facilitator? Because you mentioned like half of the course is async, so size is quite interesting. And also optimal size is one thing, or optimal size of class is one thing. And then how do you scale the amount of people based on facilitators, or how do you think about that?
Yeah. So we have two. It's really it's an interesting subject that we're trying to dive more into and testing out at the moment is the scalability of it, because right now we have 15 max students in the courses and there's 2 facilitators basically, and that's a pretty high number. But one of the ways that we do this also is with coaching, and so understanding I think a 1 to 10 ratio is kind of an ideal, what I've heard other course creators and other live people who are teaching live courses do. And how do you create an environment where it still feels intimate even when you're at scale? And so I think there's a variety of ways of people do this with different kind of small cohorts within the cohort. And at the moment, we've been keeping our capacity at 15 though. So that's how we do it.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. One last question. We got time for 1 or 2. Any other curiosities?
Yes. Hello. I have a question for you, Hannah. You've been doing this for a while, right? If you were to start over again with everything that you know right now, what would you do differently, if anything? Like this hindsight, but like, what can we learn from where you learned? Like, what would you do?
Good question.
Yeah, I think if I looked back at everything, what would I do differently? I think I would invest in marketing earlier. Because I think that is really some of the hardest part. And I think like there's as I said, we leveraged our capabilities and our experiences and we can learn a lot, but I think bringing in people who have experiences and knowledge that you don't have as soon as you can be super impactful.
Yes, my follow-up question. When you talk about investing in marketing, are you talking about investing in someone who can do that properly, or about you learning more about it? It's like, how would you approach that?
I think there's a certain level that's really important for you to know, because then you have to understand, you have to have some judgment there, let's say. But also understanding when is the right time to bring in somebody else's expertise that maybe your time would be more useful using at something else.
Yeah.
And so, we're a really small team. And so part of we have to do both. And so it's, I think, something that, yeah.
That's the scary part, isn't it? It's like, because then you put money and time into, someone else, and you don't feel like it's hard to judge whether it weigh up against the return on the investment. So that's why I kind of think that's where I'm a bit now. It's like at that cusp of, I know there's so many things I can't do well. Someone else should be supporting me, but do I invest in them to get it back? Yeah.
I think part of it's also investing in
Definitely.
Part of that, understanding where to put your time too, that I think is really important, is also understanding what can you automate, or what can you outsource in a different way. It doesn't have to be a person. For us, we were building those Notion databases, and I kind of still sometimes miss them because I had full control over it. But scaling it and duplicating it and sending it to each person's email and all of this ended up being such a time sink that it was a long decision process to really switch over to a platform. And it really, after the setup time, it was really, really powerful and freed up more time to focus on other areas. And so investing in it is not just always a person. It can be in a program, it can be in an automation, it can be in other things as well.
Yeah, knowing how to judge those choices. Super interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathleen. Yashvir.
Hi, Hannah. So I just want to ask that if there is something you feel that online versus in person, like you feel that online you still have some sort of restrictions when it comes to teaching people. What is it? What's in your mind?
What are some of those restrictions still with the online version? I think the hardest thing to reproduce in the virtual space is the casual conversation between people. And so you can do breakout rooms and you can create moments of being able to have people share and have conversations go. But for maybe, Kathleen and Maya to go over the corner and chat for a second, like that on their own accord, that's really hard to reproduce. And sometimes those unintended opportunities for conversation and collaboration, we can try to recreate them, but I haven't really seen the perfect solutions, let's say, yet into how to have that same experience. So in live experiences, or in person, let's say, experiences, it just kind of happens a little bit more naturally.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, last one.
Awesome. Can I ask a selfish question based on my scenario at the moment? Is that okay?
For me, it's fine. Yeah.
All right. Okay. I'm guessing everybody's okay with it. Cool. Nobody. Okay. Cool.
Go for it.
So I built so I'm running this 6-week cohort in, let's just say, in the next 10 days. I've built it over the last 3 to 4 weeks, and I sold it before I built it. So when I got my first customer, then I started building it, right? So
Yeah.
It was really fast. It's also on Notion. So I'm feeling a bit nervous because everything is coming together. Everything's super manual, exactly like you said. Any advice for me just being where you were in 2020? And so I could just kind of download what you've learned, apart from everything you said, but other advice for folk in that situation.
Yeah, don't worry. I think most people, that's how it happens. It's like laying the railroad tracks in front of you as you go. And I think that's okay. I think that's how a lot of people do it. And so I think keep going is what I would suggest, and don't worry about that too much. It's never going to be perfect. One of the wonderful things about live experiences is that we change them every time. So every cohort that we do, every workshop that we do, even if we've done it 10 times before, it's never the same. And so we are also laying the railroad tracks in front of every time. And that's one of the really magical things about live courses also, is that sometimes we hear something at the beginning of the 3 weeks and we change something for that cohort before the cohort ends. And that is something that we can't do with these synchronous courses. And so that is something that I think is really special too.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I definitely needed to hear that. Thank you.
Here's a round of applause for you, Chris. Knock 'em socks off. And another round of applause for Hana. Thank you so much for sharing your lessons learned with us. Opening a quick poll for everyone. Check out one thing I'm taking away for my projects or contacts. And Hannah, if you have a super fast fingers, there was a question from Philip in the chat. What's something you're still experimenting with yourself? Or feel free to also answer it verbally while we're checking out here.
Yeah, surprisingly, out of all this, I'd love to learn how to experiment with a bit more of asynchronous work. Kind of how do you bring that engagement? How do you bring that motivation? How do you bring that, all of that stuff to a slightly maybe hybrid kind of version? I think that's a challenge that I'm excited about. After I just really humped up synchronous work.
I was one of the questions I had was this: what stands in the way of a self-paced course? Because I think from the first session that we had with Luke, we saw that he's moving a bit from, or he kind of builds another arm of his cohort-based synchronous learning experience in the shape of a async course that is priced at a lower price tag, much more accessible, and so on. So I was like, is that something you're thinking about? You're considering?
Yeah, I think we're just thinking about scalability in a variety of ways. And I think some of that has to come with offerings that are at a lower price point, because not everyone even has an education budget, or not everyone can afford the education budget. Or maybe there's people in different time zones that we can't support. And so I think being able to offer it to other people, but how does that look in like a Fountain Institute way? Like, how do we keep the elements of engagement and practicality and feedback and critique and all of these, how do we keep that into that like experience as well? I think is really important.
All right. Okay. Here we are, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Hannah, for all your food for thought, insights, lessons learned. I hope to see you guys in one of the next sessions that we have. We have 3 more lined up. Links in the chat. Enjoy the rest of your day. Go smash those goals, build those courses, launch those products, and be awesome. It was great to see you. Take care, and see you very soon.